And you can see then on these tables, I wrote down all the times, and then I taped the strips in there so that we can use them as reference, noting changes in chemistry and stuff like that later on. Add them all together, average them, divide it by 3, and then that gives you a rough development time in minutes, and then you round it down to get the actual times. The developing is done in a series of stages. You could do a pre-wash on the film. I don't normally do that with these older films unless there's grit or sand or something else that needs to be washed on them, just because they're so fragile. I'd rather skip and go right to the development. The first step is the developer. The developer goes into the canister and it processes, and then we move to the stop. And then the stop bath does its magic, and then we move to the fixer, and then to the perma wash for photo flow, and then the final wash. I start pouring in the developer into the canister, and then about halfway through the developer going in, I go ahead and start the stopwatch, and then I do a full minute of agitation. Now, since this is going to be a long process, I've skipped ahead and edited the photo or the video here a little bit for you, so you don't have to sit there through the whole process. But you can see it is a gentle rolling of the canister, and then I turn it just slightly as I roll it, and then I tap it hard on the counter there. The tapping releases air bubbles that get stuck to the film and allows the chemistry to actually get to the emulsion. The developer reacts to the emulsion by affecting the bromide and the silver halide gel that is put on the base layer. And when you take a photo, the light goes in and it goes ahead and releases the electrons that are in that gel, and the silver halide clumps together to form a latent image. The bromide then is released into the gel. The developer enhances that, and you can see here the same process with the silver canister on the second roll. And we're going to be jumping ahead and showing you just snippets of the development process, the stop bath, the fixer, and the wash, instead of sitting here for 17 or 20 minutes going through all of it. I go ahead and I am placing the chemicals back in the water bath, and that is to maintain a 68-degree temperature throughout the whole development process. If you don't maintain a 68-degree temperature or a constant temperature, then you can develop what's called reticulation. An older film has that already. It's something that shows up a lot on really old films. But by keeping the temperature the exact same, it keeps that reticulation under control as much as we possibly can. The reticulation is when that clumping of the silver halide actually gets affected by humidity and temperature changes. And that's why some of the old films look like they have what looks like fingerprints all over them, only huge, large fingerprints. And it's because the emulsion is actually shifting and moving based on temperature changes and humidity. So by processing everything and putting them, you can see I put things right back into the the water temperature bath. I'm keeping everything at 68 as close as possible. Now the HC110 that you just saw me pour out, HC110 is what's called a one and done developer. You can only use it one time for your film. Some developers can be used multiple times, but I found that it's best to use a one and done for these old films. The multi-use ones, you have to keep track of how much has been used and adjust your times and everything else, and it becomes too much of a variable when you're trying to keep track of a standard process. Now here's the stop bath. The stop bath is being poured out, and this is reused. I reuse the stop bath quite a bit. That way I don't waste it. And the same with the fixer. The fixer is one of those chemicals that I will reuse, and I'm pouring in the fixer right now. The agitation for the developer is 1 minute of agitation, and then 4 or 5 rotations of the canister every minute until the development time is done. Then you pour it out, pour in the stop bath, and the stop bath agitation is 1 continuous rotation for 1 minute of the canister. And frequently I'll set it down and give it a tap just to make sure the air bubbles are getting freed from sticking to the emulsion on the film. Then the fixer is poured in, and the fixer is the same as the developer. The first minute is a constant rotation. Then it goes to a 4 or 5 minute rotation that takes place at the top of every minute until the fixing process is done. The perma-wash process, which we'll go into here in just a minute, the perma-wash process is something that can just sit. However, about halfway through it, I like to rotate it 4 or 5 times and then just tap it just to make sure that there's no air bubbles and it's getting fresh chemistry on there. The stop bath neutralizes the developer and it stops the development process. The fixer locks in the emulsion and keeps any further development from happening from light exposure and aging and radiation for years to come. The perma-wash acts as basically it's like a dish soap. It is a detergent that goes on there, and it prevents water drops from building up just like you would in your dishwasher, and so that it dries cleaner and dries without drops. The water drops themselves can actually cause problems with the emulsion and when you're scanning it or developing the film. So you want to keep the film as clean as possible and no water drops on it. And you can see I've got along with the graduated cylinders and stuff, there's a couple squeegees there and a sponge squeegee, and based on the film that I'm developing, I'll use the different type squeegees to go ahead and get all the water off if at all possible, so it dries even better. Now here we've done the perma wash, and we've got to the step where we can actually start the final wash. Now the final wash is going to be a wash process where we fill the tank up 7 times and then we dump it each time. After the 7 times, then we remove the cap, and if we're lucky, we'll get the water at the right speed, the right pressure, and the right location on the reel inside that it floats to the top, and then it basically releases the air bubble and it burps, and you'll see that here. I rotate it around just to make sure that I'm getting, you know, fresh water clear down in all the grooves. And this is roll number 1. This is the older roll. And then I place it in there and adjust it just so. And I know that if I put the water stream just off center and close to the edge of the tube, it'll float to the surface with the air pressure. And then once the air pressure builds up, it'll release, and then the film will drop down. And this process continues for about the rest of the 7 minutes. You know, all in all, it's a wash cycle of 10 minutes, but with the 7 canisters, it'll go about 7 more minutes or so. And then we'll pull the film out, take a look at it, and then squeegee it off. Now some people, they'll pull apart the film reels. I don't like doing that because after a while some of these older reels don't go back together very well. So I'll pull the strip off carefully, take a look at it, and right now I'm seeing that, yeah, there's damage to the edge of the film. There's a lot of fogging, and there are some images on there, but it's very unlikely we're going to be able to salvage that, but we'll see. Then I move on and I go through the development process with the second roll, and the second roll was in the silver canister. Because of the debris that was on there, I used the metal reel instead of the plastic ratcheting reel. And you'll see me go through the process of the development. A lot of waiting. It's kind of like Christmas. Pull the cap off, drain the developer. It is kind of an exciting thing in a way because as you go through the process, you're getting closer and closer to seeing what actually is in the roll or inside the canister, and what sort of images you're going to be able to get out of it. Now here I have to tip this one. That canister has to be tipped so I can pour it in. Pop that tight cap on there, and then I rotate for the minute. And then once I'm done with the minute, then, well, actually this is the stop. Once I'm done with that, then I'll move to the fixer and the perma-wash and wash. The same agitation process as the other canister, where the first minute of the developer is a constant agitation. Then it is 4 or 5 rotations of the canister for the rest of the development period. And then you go ahead and move on to the stop bath, and it's 1 constant minute of stop bath development or agitation. And then we move on to the fixer, and the fixer is the same process of 1 minute of agitation, and then 4 or 5 rotations for every minute after, until the whole process is done. Now here we've finished the developer, the stop, and the fix, and we'll be going on to the perma wash. And I don't use this canister too much, pretty obvious. It's like, hey, how do I get this poured in here? But after a little trial and error, I got it. And we pour out the perma wash. Now the perma wash can be used a lot. The only thing about the perma wash is with these older films with sand and grit and things like that that show up on these films from, you know, storage, dust, and who knows what else has happened to these.